I either get up or I don't. Um,
Yeah.
and as much as I didn't want to, I did feel this sense of personal responsibility, even if it meant just going from the bed to the couch. But there was the responsibility to the dog. There was the responsibility to something. Um, and it's the small things that got me out of bed, I think, in the morning to start.
Yeah. I would say it's some things, some of the smaller things that kept me in bed sometimes. Like,
Mm. Welcome. I'm Jen McDowell, and you're listening to Through the Shit, a podcast for anyone going through the shit and the people who love them. In every episode, we'll hear a new story of loss, hope, and resilience, and how going through the shit led to something greater. So if you're in the shit now and feeling lost or alone, disconnected from your badass self, or in need of an ember of hope to keep putting one foot in front of the other, you're in the right place. So settle in, prepare to be moved and inspired, and welcome to the shit. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jen McDowell, and you're listening to Through the Shit, where we hear stories of triumph over tragedy and all of the amazing things that can come out of going through the shit. Today's guest is Laurie Oswald, and she's going to be telling us about a pile-on of events that occurred that changed her experience of the world and her experience in the world. So, Laurie, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here today.
thank you, Jen.
Yeah. Okay. I can't wait to hear your story. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about who you are and what you do. I think we met probably 4 years ago at this point, both when we were in fairly the semi-nascent phases of building our businesses. I think you were a year or two ahead of me at that point. But you had been making this pivot from a very professional career in corporate America. And I think I came to you initially sort of seeking advice and trying to figure out how to do the same thing on my own. So I'm, grateful that we've been able to stay in touch over the years and grateful that you're here. So let's tell everyone about you. So Laurie is founder of InteraWorks, which is a global learning company whose purpose is to elevate the human experience at work. Specializing in professional development and performance enablement, Laurie and her team guide the implementation of learning and leadership programs that reduce distraction, increase focus, and build capability for the future of work. Through years of working at all levels in companies across many industries, InteraWorks has built a reputation for empowering organizations to harness mindset, talent, and energy to produce results that matter most. As part of the InteraWorks family, Laurie has also established the Best Year Yet Foundation, which galvanizes resources and partners to serve those who serve our communities by funding learning and development nonprofit organizations dedicated to transformation for youth and adults in the U.S. and abroad, including in Europe, India, Africa, and of course the U.S. So, Laurie, you are all over the globe in the work that you do. Laurie graduated from Purdue University with a degree in industrial engineering. And prior to launching InteraWorks, Laurie spent over 20 years in corporate technology and manufacturing sectors. On a personal note, Laurie, when she is not busy working, enjoys spending time with her family and does activities such as hiking, boating, cooking, and traveling, and planning new ways to connect with and support others who are devoting their lives to making a positive difference in the world. So, Laurie, you aren't busy at all, are you?
Well, I guess I am somewhat, but it's all good. That's what life's all about.
Yeah, only a little bit. So I'm really glad to have you here to tell your story. And I remember when I was telling you, so I've got this idea for a podcast and I want to have guests who come on and tell me their stories of shit. You said, well, I might have a story, but I'm not entirely sure what you're looking for, if this meets the criteria. And so then you kind of told me the rough highlights of your story. And I thought, holy cow, this would be amazing for people to listen to. So I'm glad to hear
Mhm.
your story. Again, and glad for our listeners to listen to it for the first time. But before we start talking about your story, why don't we talk a little bit about what this idea of going through the shit means? I mean, the podcast is called Through the Shit. People sort of either know or don't know what that phrase means. And so I think for you, as you reflect on your story, what does the idea of going through the shit mean to you?
Yeah, that was such a provocative question right out of the gate. And I think you know when you're going through something that A, things will never be the same in a dramatic way, number one. And number two, that whatever it is, this experience is calling forth something from you that feels
Mm.
impossible, feels like an insurmountable, mountain or something that you've goes beyond what you think you're capable of. So I think there's that sense of, wow, this is really causing me to reach into some new depths, as well as that things are never going to be the same.
Yeah. I mean, as you use the word mountain, and that was sort of the analogy that was coming up for me as you were starting to kind of talk about this. It's this idea of you are at the base of this really tall mountain, and it's the moment, for me at least, when you're looking up and thinking, all right, this is it. I got to start the climb.
And sometimes with like cement around your feet, right? You just don't even feel like you can move.
Oh
So
my
that's
gosh.
the
Yeah.
dichotomy of the situation.
Yeah, so it's this recognition that, like, you need to take this action and you're afraid, you don't know how, and you are also feeling just, like, stuck. It feels impossible and you don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that lens of or framework in mind, are you ready to tell me your shit?
You bet. Let's step in
Okay.
it.
All right. Well, tell me about it.
So we all probably can recall the year 2020, right? The first year of the global pandemic, which was, in and of itself, an extraordinary pile of shit for the world. Very confusing and uncertain and chaotic and scary. And when that occurred, we had been in business about 3 years. And of course, we're a learning and development company. 75% of our work was on site, working with groups around the world. And all of that went away in a flash. Like all of the business that our corporate clients had booked was just gone. And so that was piece one, on top of, right, the immediate uh, fear and confusion that everybody had about what was this that was happening and how do we deal with it, and loved ones getting sick and all of that. So we had the business aspects on top of it. And the team actually came together. And in that regard, I'm so proud of us during that time because we just started doing free work to help. We created a program on resiliency. We're a learning and development company, so let's support people through this. So we figured out ways to deal with it, but it was incredibly stressful. Personally, we had been renting a home in Tennessee, and then we had another home in Florida that I'd had. It was my mother's home, which actually is kind of a loop into this story. And we immediately decided to move out of one home to reduce our expenses. So we quickly we got out of the Tennessee home. We put everything in storage. We moved down into the Florida home to help the business. And then in September of that year, we got hit unexpectedly by a hurricane, a direct hit. We were home at the time. The hurricane took a 90-degree turn at the last minute. Our whole neighborhood was home, actually, and it was a very slow-moving storm. It sat on us over an entire night. It was incredibly terrifying and did a lot of damage in the neighborhood and a lot of damage to the house. And so when you wake up the next morning and you see, 4 feet of water across a neighborhood and everything is just everywhere and there's lots of damage, you're sort of taken down to this really base level of survival for a bit, right? And it's so overwhelming for any of you listening that have been through a natural disaster. It's just a whole other conversation we could have about what occurs emotionally and physically and mentally. There's so much pressing in and you're just trying to get from hour to hour. So we then had to, within about a week, realized that the damage was so extensive that the house needed to be completely torn up and redone. We had to move out of that house. So there weren't a lot of people to help us at the time. So we moved everything out of that house. And then the week that we moved out, my father-in-law suddenly passed away, not from COVID, but he had been in the hospital. And so there was just this piling on of COVID and then the business and then moving out of one house and then having the other one destroyed and moving out of that and
Mm.
dealing with death. We had family that had hardship through COVID and a loss that was pretty significant. So that's the piling on. And then what I would also say is the home that got destroyed that we were in had been my mother's home. She passed away suddenly almost 25 years before.
Mm.
And that keeping that house most of the time, it was rented out so we could afford it, but keeping that home was my connection to her. Um, and to know that we were going to have to tear it up, right, and take everything out of it, and it would never be the same. It just sort of brought that loss,
Mm.
which was another pile of shit on another podcast, but connected all that together. So there was just, a lot happening at all those different levels.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I'd say that qualifies as shit, Lori.
It was pretty
Yeah.
shitty. It was.
It was. And I think, there were two things that you said that kind of resonated with me. The first is this idea of like survival mode. I remember when I was going through
Mhm.
my parade of horribles, I got to the point where it almost felt like I was underwater or in some sort of like bubble, and everything is just a little bit distorted. And I felt like I was both
Yeah.
sort of moving really slowly and also moving at the speed of light, because you just get to the point where you are reacting to everything that's happening. When my mom died fairly unexpectedly, it went from like, okay, we got to do this to this to this to this to this to this to the plan funeral and do this and make this announcement and do this thing and buy this thing and get this thing and tell these people. And um, but yet also this sort of like mode of dissonance where you can't even sort of realize that this is the life that you're living. At least that's what it was for me.
Yeah.
The other thing that I then very quickly came to learn and experience, much like you did, is this idea of like compounded grief. I mean, so there's the grief of the thing that happens first, um, the grief of losing, all of your client engagements while you're trying to figure out how to support your team, while there is all this uncertainty because of the pandemic. Um, and then you have the hurricane happen, and just as you feel like you're starting to get your legs under you again, something else happens, and it kind of piles on and
Mhm.
sort of becomes kind of this insurmountable mountain, right, that you have to navigate. And then the last sort of thing that you were dealing with was the old wound of your mother's passing and the
Mhm.
recognition that that home, all of the memories that were held in it is never going to be the same again. And so I remember going through those moments myself as well, because like every time something happened, it brought up all of the old stuff back to the surface again. And so, um, I just, one, thank you for telling your story. And two, I think, how did you keep putting one foot in front of the other with every single hit that you had?
Well, it was an unusual time for the world. So I think one aspect was, you know, everybody was going through something, and we were very aware of that. I was aware of that. So in a way, it was okay. We're not alone, um, and people are dealing with hard things, and people are dealing with even harder things. Right? It could be a lot worse, but at least in that instance, I think a real gift was we weren't alone. I think when my mother passed away and there were some other complications related to that, kind of like some of the things you went through in those instances, it's easy to feel very alone. Like life is going on, the world is marching on. I'm dealing with this thing here. And it can be very despairing in that way. And at least in that case, everybody was going through things right at the same
Mm,
time.
Yeah.
Also there was, responsibility, personal responsibility is we do work with that with our clients. It's something that's important to me. And I just had a lot of responsibility. We had our youngest child was living with us at the time. She was that high school graduating class of 2020. So she was doing
Mm.
online college. We were working from home. So the three of us, just kind of kept moving around that year. We ended up moving three more times after the hurricane because there were very few places to live that were habitable. Um, and, you know, responsible for my team, responsible for our clients, responsible for trying to, you know, fix things that were happening and get on a plan to
Mhm.
sort the house out and get it, put back together, which you start dealing with insurance in a situation like that. It's literally another big pile of shit. It's so complicated and distressing to try to resolve all of that, but just an incredible level of responsibility every day,
Yeah.
right? For so many things and so many people. And so, I think that was just, you just got to keep going, right? Just have to keep moving.
Yeah.
Stopping, there was just no possibility of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's this idea of you have to get out of bed for something, and everybody has their thing. Um, I'm curious, because you talked about at the outset, going through the shit is that moment where you realize you're at the foot of the mountain. And so, because you had so many things happening, do you remember, was there a point in which you realized you were at the base of the mountain, or did it just kind of feel like a pylon?
Um, well, it felt like a pile-on for a long time
Mhm.
because my father-in-law dying then required a lot of travel and sort of additional displacement, trying to support my mother-in-law who was dealing with multiple challenges in that situation. I think probably some glimmers of light started to occur. We started getting a little work back from our clients. Fortunately, we were very, very good at virtual delivery of our programming and have been doing that for a long time. So we didn't have to
Mhm.
learn how to do that. We had to enroll some of our clients in that working, but um, it was also, I think it was the third place that we lived after the storm for a while that was a comfortable enough place that we could work and our daughter could go to school. And there's those moments where for a year, we had our suitcases of clothes and we had some bins full of office materials and we had some bins of food. And that's really all we had. I think there's also, not only are there things that start to turn for the better in your situation, but I think we got to a point where we just accepted and sort of started to enjoy the simplicity and kind of have
Mhm.
fun with it. And like here we are with our bins sort of moving around and this is all we have. And you know what? We're all okay. We're all together. I can remember since it's Christmas time now, we laugh about I went out to buy a Christmas tree and there were just none. There were none anywhere. And I found this, little Charlie Brown tree at a grocery store, I think, and brought it back. And we invited our next door neighbors over who also had to move out of their house. And we sat with the old fashioned construction paper and we made the little loops that we hooked together to make garland to put on this little tree. And we had such a good time. And I still have a box with the stuff that we made that year. So I think at some point, the sense of humor kicks in, the appreciation
Mhm.
of it could be worse kicks in. And certainly some of the physical things started to get better.
Mm.
But really, you start to come out of it, in my experience, when you change your relationship to the situation.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, is it fair to say that, looking back is now when you really have the perspective of being at the base of the mountain?
Yeah, because anytime you look back on something, you can see the trajectory, right? You can see the beginning, middle, and end. You don't know it when you're in it.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's a learning, a lesson, right? Is that anything can happen really at any moment. Um, and when you look back, you also have the appreciation of seeing the other side of things. Like you can see both sides of the mountain. You can see the positives of that. Um, but for a while, it just seemed like we were never going to get off the base of the, of the mountain. You know,
Yeah, you're stuck at base camp.
I can imagine you can relate to that.
Oh, totally. I don't even think I realized that it was a mountain. I just remember the days where I couldn't get up, where I didn't want to get up. And you talked about
Hmm.
this sense of personal responsibility. And for me, the choice was I either get up or I don't. Um,
Yeah,
and as much as I didn't want to, I did feel this sense of personal responsibility, even if it meant just going from the bed to the couch. But there was the responsibility to the dog, there was the responsibility to something. Um, and it's the small things that got me out of bed, I think, in the morning to start.
yeah. I would say it's some things, some of the smaller things that kept me in bed sometimes, like
Mm,
trying to navigate. When you're in a natural disaster, there all of a sudden there's a lot of scarcity, right? Initially, there's community, but then there's a lot of scarcity when everybody's trying to just take care of themselves, and there's scarcity of resources and helpers and materials and places, and it becomes a lot harder than you expect pretty quickly. And now, since then, every time I see a natural disaster coming on or occurring, my heart breaks because I know that the people there don't know what's ahead. They have
mm,
no idea how difficult it's going to be and all the many surprises that they'll encounter. But back to, you think you pay insurance for something and you file a claim, right? And you get your money. That's what we're all used to. But in this case, that's not what happens. Um, and you're put in a position where you have to sort of prove what has occurred, and that's takes a lot of work. And then you have to sort of make your case, and then wait and go through a long series of hoops, sometimes years. It took years for us to
mm.
work through that process. And there's those moments where you think, really, after all these things, after all this time, after all we've been through, that was the thing that I just really hit a wall against, because it's something you trust and you don't think is going to be difficult. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's a small moment that puts you over the edge in those big situations. And that one did for me
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah. I can only imagine. I mean, I know the days when I kind of lose my mind because it's like the smallest thing is the straw that breaks the camel's
Yeah.
back. And how do you continue to sort of bounce back in those moments where you think I've done everything right and yet still here I am tackling this thing that one, I don't want to be tackling in the first place. And
Yeah.
two, has all of these unexpected surprises, to use your words, as a result of it.
Mhm.
So, how do you come back from the small thing?
Um, it sounds cliche, but you know, it can always be worse. Um,
Mm,
I think also there's a responsibility works in two ways, right? There's responsible for resilience and solving um, and continuing on, but there's also a level of power that comes from taking responsibility for your part in things.
mm,
Um, because we all have a part in things. We tend to experience, right, these shitty times as something happening to us, but they're also happening for us. So we may not know why, but I think trusting that, okay, there are some things happening here that are for the good, but also owning. I chose to start the business. I chose this kind of business, right? We chose to have a home in a vulnerable area. There's things like that in every situation that the sooner we take responsibility for it, I know for me, moves me through them because then you're back in control, right? You're not entirely a victim. It's like, okay, I didn't cause this, but I have a part in it. I have a
Mhm.
responsibility in it. And
Yeah.
that is something that has helped me sometimes.
Yeah. When I was going through my parade of horribles, I remember saying all the time, like, this sucks, but surely there has to be something that comes out of this. There has to be something on the other side. And, I kind of heard that from you. You also talked about like responsibility again, and one I maybe want to loop back to something that you said earlier about changing your relationship to the situation, and that was really important for you in order to see your part of how this all played out. I chose to do this, I chose to do this, I chose to have a home here. Sometimes that still makes things even more frustrating because you think, oh, I chose this, if only I had chosen something different, right?
Yeah, doesn't
um,
feel great
Right,
sometimes.
doesn't feel great at all. But it sounds like there was, or was there maybe a moment where you said, "Okay, I need to choose my relationship to this situation." And if so, tell me about that moment, like, what was the catalyst?
Yeah. Well, one aspect is I do believe it's really important. Like these things are hard. What you went through was incredibly difficult. And I do believe there's incredible value in expressing our emotions around that. Even if there's other people going through worse things, I think the sooner we can express that, all the feelings that we have, it helps us to start to let go. I know that I didn't do that when my mother passed away, and I still feel the grief come up sometimes,
Right.
just like it just happened, and it's been decades. And I think it's really important, and was for me to have moments to express that. And if we don't, it just delays, right, our ability to let go and to heal. But in the work that we do and in my own sort of learning and development, we human beings tend to suffer from one of two causes. Either we have attached to something, right? We have a strong attachment or desire, or grasping of something, or we are resisting or reacting something. It's almost always one of those two things, right? We get angry or we react or we're in resistance. And if you can get out of that duality and just be with it, um, it starts to change our experience of things, right? We can just be in it. We can be present. We can be present with others. We can navigate, and find the way through much, much more easily. Um, but I think, you said it as well. When there's loss involved, particularly an emotional loss, whether it's something physical or a person or an experience or something that's part of our identity, it just leaves such a gap. And it does
Yeah,
create a lot of suffering.
it sure does. And I think for me, I was always very much I was raised in the Midwest, sort of, oh, we hide those emotions and shove them down deep and
Yep, yep.
never let them see the light of day. And I think one of the things that my experience taught me or helped me understand was there was just so much emotion that I was carrying and holding that it was kind of like a volcano and
Mhm.
I could not hold it back anymore. Um, and it just kind of came out all the time. Um, and I got to see for myself that experience of letting it go.
Mm. What did that feel like for you?
Um, I mean, at first it was all the things. I mean, it was yucky and uncomfortable, and it took years for me to understand that it would not kill me, because thought
Mm,
that if I opened the floodgate, it was going to drown me. I was going to drown in my emotions, and it took a ton
mm,
thousands of dollars in therapy and trauma work and all this stuff to sort of get to the point where I recognized that my floodgate of emotions was not going to drown me. Um,
Mhm.
so it was really
Yeah.
scary at first, to even sort of let the floodgate open a little bit. Um, I don't know if that resonates with you or where you are in your own journey with that, but certainly getting to the point where I could just experience the emotions as they are without attachment. Because you said, it's either attachment to something or resisting or reacting. And I think for me, it was like both. They were connected
Yeah.
because I had some sort of expectation
Mhm.
or attachment. So being able to just have the emotions as they were was part of the lesson
Yeah.
learning for me, I guess.
Well, I'm glad you did. Glad you were able to get there. And, we rarely go through something alone. From what I know of your story, you were quite alone. I was fortunate to have
Mhm.
support. I never felt like I was going through any of this alone. It still didn't make it um, any less difficult. But there's such power in the connection that we all have to be the listeners, to be the helpers, to be the supporters. So that we can be a rising tide to help everyone. There's also this, I don't know if you can relate to this, in this experience of suffering, um, is our challenge around things changing as human beings. Generally, not always, but generally, change brings up negative emotions and negative mental constructs. Um, and we are not very good at facing into the fact that every single thing is impermanent. Everything is impermanent. Everything is changing at this very moment. And it's something that we bring into our work in a number of our programs is sort of waking people up to this finite nature of time, and anything can change and at any minute. So make the most of it, but also it will change. Things will not stay forever. Nothing. An object, a person, a relationship, a situation, it all changes. But it's daunting as it was in mine and as in yours when there's a lot changing, one after another after another. You know,
Yeah.
just no anchor point. There's no touchstone in that. Very confusing.
Yeah. I mean, you have all of these sort of nuggets that you've shared and have brought up over the course of our conversation. This idea of impermanence, being comfortable with letting go of things, changing your perspective toward the situation. Um, and I'm curious, as you're looking back now that you have all of these lessons, was there anything that you would have done differently?
Uh, I think probably sharing more of my own emotions and my own
Mm.
difficulty. There, I own that I just experienced that it wasn't appropriate. There just wasn't a place for that. Um, so I think sharing more of that, as you did, whether it's pretty or not, probably would have helped. I think also being more present with others. I think now I look back on the situation, and it's like there was so much going on for me. I feel like I'm a pretty present human being, but like what was happening for my college, new college student living in the
Yeah.
house, sort of watching and experiencing all of this. She was going through her own right loss and difficulty, being sort of stuck with us, even though we're close, and a lot of it was very positive. But it's like I think even in a moment, in our darkest, deepest moments, we can help ourselves by just pausing to be present with something else, right? Be present for a moment with what's going on over here, and even help, generosity and help always to this day. If I'm having a crummy day, the thing that will get me out of it the quickest is being generous of spirit or helping somebody else. It just gets us out of ourselves,
Mm,
you know?
yeah.
So those are some things that come to mind.
Yeah, thank you. And you touched on something around being present that I think ties in with one of my regrets of things that I would want to do differently as well. Um, and it's come up a couple of times because you were talking about we were all going through something really hard during 2021. Um, because of the pandemic, but also because of all of the ways that the pandemic changed each of us in our lives individually. And I know
Yeah.
I got to the point where I was so in my own shit that I couldn't recognize that there were other people who were, grieving the loss of my mom or, beyond sort of the obvious people. Um, and that grief hits everyone differently, and we all experience a situation differently. And keeping the lines of communication open, even amongst, your own messiness, I think is really important to helping people feel not alone because, just because I'm going through something hard myself doesn't mean that you aren't going through something hard and you get to have your own hard experience. And if we can talk about it together, I think it's a really powerful experience. And I regret now looking back that sometimes I was so in it that I couldn't be open and present to that experience for the other people who were having a hard time as well. So I'm sorry to those who
Yeah. And it doesn't, and you can
yeah.
do both, right? It almost sort of gives you a little break. You kind of get out of your own way for a moment.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I remember that week we had moved out and we were just exhausted and, still dealing with, the various things. And my mother in law, lost the person she was married to for 60 years and was completely lost in dealing with her own challenges. And um, I mean, we're all in this together and, you might be in the shit at a moment, but this is the human journey. You already know from doing this work that you're doing and talking with people, we all have these stories and so many more things in common. And those moments, if we can just get out of it and connect to something else, it's just such a perspective, shift.
Yeah.
Even if you don't want to, you don't feel it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's part of it is doing the thing even when you don't want to sometimes. But, I think to kind of round things out at this point, Lori, you know, if if there's someone out there in the shit now who's, needing some inspiration, what would you tell them?
Well, I'd start with impermanence works both ways. So uh, the good things are not permanent; they will change, but the bad things aren't either. They will change as well, and just to have faith in that. And the other is, while a lot harder in practice, we do have control over our own perspective and how we view things. Right? We do have control over our mind, which ultimately, influences our emotions. And I think when we feel most powerless, to be able to orient yourself to what is my power now, um, and shift to what do I do have control over, whether it's in the situation or in my mind or in my emotions. We have more control than we think.
Mm,
So whatever you can do to, I think, help you shift into that, uh, that starts to be a time when you have that feeling of coming out of the shit just a little bit, you know?
yeah. Impermanence goes both ways, and we have more power than
Right.
we realize. Wise words.
Ah, hope so. I hope so.
Well, Lori, thank you so much for being here with me today. I've greatly enjoyed our conversation. And for those of you who are out there going through the shit right now, hang in there. You've got this. And we will see everyone on the flip side. Bye, everyone. That's it for this episode of Through the Shit. Thanks for listening. If you liked this podcast, like, share, and subscribe, and maybe send it to someone who needs a boost because they're going through the shit. While you're at it, tell them how important they are to you. If you have a story of shit to share or you're in the shit now, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at throughtheshitpodcast@gmail.com or go to our website at throughtheshit.com. I'll see you on the flip side.